Continuing our conversation here on News Talk with D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser, who, as we mentioned at the outset of the program, begins her 10th year of public service today, the mayor having been sworn in as Ward 4 Councilwoman 9 years and 1 day ago. To the phones we go. Robert in the district, you've been holding, and I apologize, but thank you for your patience. Go ahead, please.
All right. First, I'd like to say good afternoon, Bruce, and good afternoon, Madam Mayor.
Good afternoon.
Thank you. Basically, I just want to bring up an issue. You had mentioned that D.C. officials will be meeting with CSX. I also need to bring to your attention a long-standing problem along Puerto Rico Avenue in which the vibration from these heavy trains have affected these homes. The people have been asking for relief, but so far the only response we've gotten from VDOT is the planting of trees. What the people want is a meeting with CSX to hash out the issues and or a vibration study to prove how strong or weak these vibrations are, and a realistic plan of action from that point.
Thank you, caller. Do you know this neighborhood?
I know it very well. That's where I grew up.
Oh.
So I grew up very close to Puerto Rico Avenue, and the trains, both Metro trains and cargo trains, and the house where I lived for 15 years, also close to those tracks. So I'm not familiar with the homeowners having presented an issue to DDOT, but I would be happy to look into it.
And people can always email you.
Absolutely.
You probably hate for me to do this on live TV,
no,
but mayor@dc.gov.
Yep, you got it.
And so Robert can follow up with you that way and see what you're able to get from the agency.
Okay.
The Washington Post had a big story recently talking about, so Metro just turned 40.
Yep.
And they went back and they reviewed a ton of documents, and what they kind of concluded was that leadership at Metro has missed many warning signs, lots of warning signs, lots of opportunities missed to keep the agency, to keep WMATA, particularly rail, from getting to the crisis point that many believe it's in right now. You were on the Metro board, and I guess I'm curious, have you done a kind of self-analysis, given that you've been part of the leadership team? Did you, if you read the article, did you come away with the same sense that there were warning signs that weren't heeded and opportunities that weren't fully grasped?
Well, I wasn't on the board for 40 years. I was on it for a couple of years. And I did have some key learnings that I passed on to the board member that I appointed, and also to Jack Evans, who is the council's representative and now chairs the board. One of the biggest things that I think I took away was that the information asymmetry between the board members and the staff is huge. And the board needs to have its own set of experts, technical experts, governance experts, and legal advice, separate and apart from the staff. And that is what I passed on to Jack. One of the big things that I learned, for example, with the financial issues around Metro, were basically hidden by audits that came through with flying colors, later to find out that there were shell games going on with some of the grants and monies that should come from the federal government. So the board, I think, would be best served if they had an expert that's doing that and providing that type of advice to the board.
In hindsight, do you have the sense that the board was being sort of managed by the staff in terms of the flow of key facts?
Well, the Metro is not alone in that. A lot of times, staff who are there 24/7, and there are 11,000 of them, and there are, a much smaller number of board members. That can happen, and oftentimes it's perfectly fine. But in some cases where there's information that is not getting up to the board, it can be a huge problem.
What are your thoughts about the path forward?
Well, I think that it's not going to be an overnight path, but I think that they have made some strong moves to get there. So I think hiring the general manager was critical, having the board focused on the big issues around safety first, and reliability and getting financially secure is very important to us. So I think Paul has been there for a few months. We're expecting him to make sure that his operation is lean and effective. That's one thing that I've told Jack Evans. Jack Evans made a presentation to the council that said in their 2018 budget they're going to come back to the 3 jurisdictions and ask for $80 million additional dollars. Now, we already pay Metro $330 million to operate, which is a bigger payment than some D.C. government agencies. So I said, if you're going to come back to us and ask for $80 million more, we need to see the path that Metro is taking to become more lean and effective in operating and really looking hard at their bureaucracy. So we've asked them to do that. We've also asked them to step up their efforts around security. Probably the last time that I was with you, I talked about my concerns in making sure that any crimes on Metro are swiftly prosecuted, that we enhance the penalties for crimes on Metro, and that we follow our prosecutors to make sure that justice is being served. But we also know that we need an additional policing or security presence at Metro. And so that's a call that I have made to Chairman Evans as well. What is Metro going to do to step up presence on platforms, at stations, to make sure that we're keeping Metro safe?
Paul Wiedefeld's decision to close the rail system for a day to give them a 28-hour window to get in and do emergency inspections and, where needed, repairs was a fascinating insight, I think, into his thinking about where the agency is and clearly about safety. Some of the subsequent comments that came from Mr. Evans gave the clear impression that doing maintenance in a way that's less inconvenient for riders with single tracking, night work, weekends, holidays, etc., is not going to get you there when you look at the work that needs to be done and the time that's available. Therefore, we could be seeing more inconvenience down the road. So maybe in the short term, paying more, in light of what you just said, paying more and getting less, the agency's going to need support from people like you to kind of weather what will be an unhappy period for riders, potentially.
Well, Metro is going to have my support, but it also has to, and nobody is asking us to write a blank check. That would be completely irresponsible. And so what we will expect from the general manager is a plan to say, you know, not knee-jerk plan, but a real plan that says if we need to take down service for a period of time, how I want to see the plan. What is not helpful to us is not to understand why service may be taken down. And what we have to all realize is that Metro is not a nicety. It's essential. It's an essential service in a city like ours and in a region like ours. And so Washington, D.C. has always been willing to step up to the plate to make sure that Metro has its needs. But you wouldn't like me as a taxpayer to say, oh, I'm going to add on bureaucracy or service at a D.C. government agency without also being able to tell you how it's going to affect service. And likewise, if we were strapped and we are always looking to use our dollars better, you would want me to look at every agency to see if I had any fat in that agency, see if I had services that weren't working well, and do something about it. And that's what we want Metro to do too.
You recently imposed, as mayor, an edict, an executive order that said that employees who might want to have been planning to attend a conference or other official thing in North Carolina or Mississippi could not go in order to stand up for values that you have and that your residents have. Do you know, and if you want to sort of put some more meat on the bone there as to why that was, please do. And I'm curious, do you know of any, were there any actual conferences or travel that were impacted by your...
I think we had a couple handfuls actually of employees that had planned to attend a conference, and I was happy, and I am happy to be a part of a group of mayors who issued similar executive orders. We get to choose where we spend our money, and if we can even send the symbolic message to fellow elected officials in other states that we don't want Washington, D.C. visitors or business people or that are traveling to their states to be discriminated against, we can do that.
Mayor, stand by for just a moment. We'll get our final break out of the way here. When we come back, though, much more of our conversation with D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser. And Lola, you're next as we go back to the phones. Please remain on the line, Lola. Keep it.